Hey guys, tonight we step into the strange and captivating world of the Aztec Empire, a civilization bursting with rituals and delights so bizarre, you might question reality itself.
Imagine yourself standing in the heart of Tenochtitlan, the great Aztec capital, surrounded by towering temples crowned with gleaming gold, the heavy scent of burning copper incense swirling through the humid air.
The distant rhythmic pounding of drums vibrating through the stone-paved plazas. The sun blazes overhead, fierce and relentless, casting sharp shadows on intricately carved stone statues that seem to watch your every move.
You probably won't survive this if you were actually living back then, but for now we're safe to explore this fascinating world from the comfort of your bed.
So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where everyone is joining from.
Whether you're drifting off in Tokyo, relaxing in Io, or winding down in Madrid, this story will weave its way through time and space to meet you.
Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Aztec Empire thrived in what we now call central Mexico from the 14th century until the early 1500s, right before the Spanish conquest. But don't imagine some dusty, forgotten civilization. The Aztecs were a vibrant, complex society with grand cities, bustling marketplaces, and yes, some of the strangest rituals and customs you ever hear about. Their culture was a kaleidoscope of astonishing achievements, remarkable architecture, astonishing agricultural techniques like floating gardens called chinampas, and a worldview saturated with the presence of gods who demanded constant attention. For the Aztecs, religion wasn't a part of life, it was life itself. Their gods were capricious, powerful, and deeply woven into every moment. The sun's daily journey across the sky wasn't just a natural event. It was a cosmic battle that required human participation through ritual and sacrifice to keep the universe in balance.
Festivals filled their calendar, some lasting days or even weeks, where the entire city might gather to offer food, flowers, and sometimes blood to the gods.
Speaking of blood, this is where things get truly bizarre, and for many, downright terrifying. The Aztecs practiced human sacrifice on a scale that has fascinated and horrified historians for centuries. But before you imagine endless barbarism, remember this was seen as a sacred duty, a necessary exchange to ensure life and fertility. The Aztecs believed that by offering the gods human hearts and blood, they were repaying the debt of creation and guaranteeing the sun would rise again. Whether these acts were purely religious or also political tools to control the populace remains a matter of debate. Some scholars argue that human sacrifice was a deeply spiritual ritual to sustain the cosmos, while others see it as a way to intimidate enemies and consolidate power. And it wasn't just about blood. The Aztecs had an intricate calendar system, 2 calendars running concurrently that guided their rituals, farming, and governance. One was a 365-day solar calendar, and the other was a 260-day ritual calendar. The overlap of these calendars dictated auspicious days for ceremonies, wars, and marriages. Let's pause and picture the bustling streets of Tenochtitlan for a moment. You're walking past vendors selling strange foods like chapulines, fried grasshoppers seasoned with chili, and atoll, a thick maize-based drink. Nearby, the scent of cocoa fills the air, as chocolate was both a delicacy and sacred drink, consumed by the elite and priests alike. Markets overflowed with textiles dyed in vibrant colors, pottery with swirling patterns, and jewelry made from gold and jade. And through it all, the constant presence of towering temples where priests performed rituals that could chill the spine. Historians still argue about many aspects of Aztec life, how much their rituals were sincere expressions of faith or a means to control society, how their warriors balanced brutal conquest with religious piety, and even the true scale of some of their ceremonies. So tonight, as you close your eyes and let the rhythms of the Aztec drums fade into the background, prepare to explore stories of divine battles, human offerings, living gods, and exquisite feasts. The Aztec Empire was a world of contradictions, brutal yet beautiful, terrifying yet deeply spiritual. It's a story that will stretch your imagination and invite you to see the past through eyes very different from your own. Let's dive deeper, and maybe, just maybe, try not to lose any sleep over it. You trudge through the buzzing markets and towering temples of Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire, where religion isn't just a part of life, it is life itself. The city hums with a sacred energy, thick with the smell of copper incense, the sharp clang of obsidian tools, and the low murmur of prayer. Everywhere you look, gods are present, carved in stone, painted on walls, and invoked in chants that echo through plazas. The Aztecs live in a world where every action is a prayer, every day a delicate negotiation with divine forces. Religion here shapes everything, from the planting of maize to the preparation for war. The Aztecs believe that the cosmos depends on their devotion, and that the gods need constant nourishment in the form of offerings, sacrifices, and ceremonies to keep the universe turning. The most powerful god, Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war deity, is at the center of this cosmic drama. Each dawn is seen as his victory over darkness, a struggle that must be renewed daily through ritual. The priests, those feather-clad intermediaries between gods and mortals, play a vital role. Their elaborate costumes shimmer with feathers and gold. Their faces painted to resemble divine beings. They perform rituals that can last days, including the infamous human sacrifices, believed necessary to appease gods and ensure cosmic balance. Yet, it's not all blood and fire. The Aztecs also celebrate with music, dance, poetry, and feasts. The festival of Toxcatl, for example, is a grand event honoring the god Tezcatlipoca. It includes the ceremonial sacrifice of a captive who, for a year, lives as a deity's earthly representative, feared and revered by all. Historians still argue whether such sacrifices were purely religious acts or if they served political purposes, intimidating enemies, reinforcing social order, and uniting the empire under a shared belief system. Maybe it was all of the above. Regardless, the rituals command attention and respect. Walking past the markets, you catch the scent of exotic foods, chocolate drinks, spicy peppers, and roasted insects. Even food is tied to spirituality, believed to carry the gods' blessings. The Aztec calendar governs it all. 2 interlocking cycles that dictate when festivals, wars, and ceremonies occur. Time itself is a sacred rhythm. So as the sun sets over the lake and drums beat into the night, you feel the pulse of a civilization unlike any other, where the divine and the mortal collide in dazzling, sometimes terrifying spectacle. Ready for more? The next tales dive into blood-soaked altars and mysterious skull racks. Buckle up. You find yourself standing at the base of the towering Templo Mayor, the heart of Tenochtitlan's religious life, where the air is thick with incense and the murmurs of prayer. Here, amid the towering stone and carved gods, the most infamous of Aztec rituals unfolds: human sacrifice. It's a practice that has captured imaginations and nightmares alike. But to understand it, you have to shed modern assumptions and step into the Aztecs' worldview, a place where life and death, devotion and terror were inseparably linked. Imagine the scene: a prisoner of war, stripped of dignity, painted and adorned to represent a deity, standing atop the sacrificial stone. Around you, priests chant, their voices rising and falling like the waves of a great ocean. The captive's heart is ripped out and offered to the gods, who are believed to require this life force to sustain the sun, the rain, and the very earth beneath your feet. This isn't mindless brutality. It's a solemn, sacred act, a cosmic exchange ensuring the balance of the universe. Historians still argue whether the scale of human sacrifice was as widespread as once thought, or if it has been exaggerated by conquerors and storytellers. Some suggest that while sacrifices were significant, they were more ritualistic than massive. Others insist the Aztecs held tens of thousands of sacrifices annually during major festivals, with elaborate public ceremonies designed to inspire awe and obedience. What's more bizarre is the ritual complexity surrounding these sacrifices. The victims were often chosen because of their perceived divine connection. They could be captured warriors, slaves, or even volunteers who believed dying was an honor that guaranteed a favored place in the afterlife. The preparation could include days of worship, feasting, and receiving special treatments to elevate their status. The Templomere itself was a symbol of duality dedicated to two gods, Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and sun, and Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility. Each had its own altar and set of sacrifices. For Tlaloc, children's tears were said to summon rain, leading to the heartbreaking practice of sacrificing young ones in hopes of a good harvest. It's a ritual that feels unfathomable today, but was, for the Aztecs, a desperate plea for survival. You also discover the role of sacrifice in Aztec politics. Captives taken in battle were often used in these rituals, reinforcing the might of the empire and sending a clear message to enemies. Sacrifice was both a spiritual duty and a political statement, a terrifying blend of faith and power. In some ceremonies, the victim's blood was collected and smeared on the idols, or the skulls were displayed on a tzompantli, an enormous rack of skulls that lined the city, both a religious offering and a chilling warning.
As the sun sets behind the temples, you feel the weight of this ritual world, the intertwining of beauty, terror, faith, and power.
The Aztec believed that the gods sacrificed themselves to create the world fueled this practice, making sacrifice not an end but a necessary continuation of life itself. Next, we'll uncover those towering tzompantli skull racks macabre displays that were both terrifying and deeply symbolic.
You're walking along a dusty road leading to the city's edge when you suddenly come face to face with the tzompantli, the towering racks of human skulls that loom like sentinels against the sky.
These eerie monuments, constructed from wooden poles stacked with hundreds, sometimes thousands of skulls, are not mere trophies of war but vital components of Aztec religious and social life.
The sight is unsettling, but within this macabre display lies a profound story of power, devotion, and cultural identity. Imagine standing beneath the skull racks, their empty eye sockets staring down like silent witnesses to countless sacrifices. The skulls weren't simply reminders of death, they were offerings meant to honor the gods and maintain cosmic balance.
The Aztecs believed that by publicly displaying these skulls, they could harness the spiritual energy released during sacrifice to nourish the sun and sustain life on Earth. This was an intensely visual message, broadcast not only to the gods, but to the living and unmissable symbol of the empire's power and divine favor. Historians still argue about the exact scale and meaning of tzompantli. Were these skull racks a terrifying form of propaganda, designed to instill fear in enemies and subjects alike?
Or were they genuinely sacred, a form of spiritual architecture intended to connect the physical world with the divine?
Some evidence suggests the skulls might have belonged to warriors, sacrificial victims, or even slaves, each category carrying different symbolic weight.
The construction of tzompantli was a careful process.
Skulls were cleaned, sometimes painted, and then pierced with wooden poles. The arrangement wasn't haphazard. It followed precise religious codes, and the height and size of the rack could reflect the scale of a particular festival or military campaign.
The most famous tzompantli stood near the Templomere, towering over the city like a grim monument to Aztec devotion. These skull racks also served a social function. They reinforced the authority of the ruling class and priests by demonstrating their ability to command life and death. The tzompantli were public displays that reinforced social hierarchies and the emperor's divine right to rule.
As you stand beneath one, you realize you are not just witnessing a religious relic, you are standing in the shadow of Aztec political power. Interestingly, similar practices appeared in other Mesoamerican cultures, suggesting a shared belief system around death, sacrifice, and power. However, the Aztecs elevated the tzompantli to unprecedented scale and significance.
Some archaeologists have uncovered tzompantli with over 500 skulls, while Spanish chroniclers spoke of even larger displays, though the exact numbers remain debated.
Remember that feeling of seeing a disturbing scene in a movie and trying to understand the story behind it.
That's what Sompantli represents, a terrifying yet revealing glimpse into a world where death was not an end but a potent symbol of love and power.
And while we might cringe at the thought today, the Aztecs viewed these rituals as essential to their survival and prosperity. Next, we'll dive into the fiery festival of Toxcatl, a celebration that blends sacrifice, masquerade, and one unforgettable human role, the living god.
You find yourself drawn into the bustling chaos of the Festival of Toxcatl, one of the most intense and dramatic celebrations in the Aztec calendar.
The air is thick with the scent of burning copper and roasted game, as hundreds gather to honor Tezcatlipoca, the powerful god of the night sky, fate, and transformation. The festival is a kaleidoscope of colors, music, and mystery, a ritual that blends festivity with a chilling, solemn sacrifice that will leave a lasting impression. The centerpiece of Toxcatl is a unique and haunting tradition, the selection of a young man to embody Tezcatlipoca himself for an entire year. This chosen individual, often a war captive or noble youth, is treated like a living god.
He wears elaborate costumes adorned with precious feathers and jewels, and he's given a special role in ceremonies and public life. During this time, he lives in luxury, enjoying the reverence of the people and the priests alike.
You can almost feel the weight of this honor, the intoxicating blend of power and impending doom. As the festival progresses, the young man participates in dances, rituals, and public appearances, embodying the god's presence on earth. The crowd watches in awe, caught between celebration and reverence. It's a potent reminder of how the divine and mortal worlds intertwine in Aztec culture. But the climax is as terrifying as it is sacred. At the festival's height, this living god must be sacrificed in a grand ceremony, his heart offered to the gods to renew the cosmic cycle. The act is not just a brutal execution, but a transformative event. His death symbolizes renewal, a necessary sacrifice for the continuation of life and balance in the universe. This paradox of life and death embodied in one person is a haunting testament to the Aztecs' complex spirituality. Historians still argue about how voluntary or coerced these living god sacrifices were. Some scholars suggest that the chosen individual accepted his fate as an honor and a path to eternal glory, while others point to the tragic reality of being trapped in a role that culminated in death. The psychological and emotional weight on that young man must have been unimaginable, an intense mix of reverence, fear, and resignation. The festival itself is a sensory overload. The clash of wooden drums, the piercing notes of conch shell trumpets, dancers moving in intricate patterns, and the vibrant colors of feathered costumes that blur the line between human and divine. Food and drink flow freely, with offerings of chocolate, maize, and exotic spices filling the air. It's a communal celebration where social classes mingle, all bound by shared faith and the looming shadow of sacrifice. This festival also illustrates the Aztecs' broader understanding of time and cycles. The sacrifice of the living god represents the necessary destruction that precedes creation, a ritual death that promises new life and prosperity. In their worldview, without such sacrifices, the sun might not rise, crops might fail, and the world could fall into chaos. So as you take in the intensity of Toxcatl, remember, what seems bizarre or horrifying to us was, for the Aztecs, a vital expression of faith and survival. They lived in a universe where gods demanded not just worship but action, where life and death danced in an eternal, terrifying embrace.
Coming up next, the Aztec ball game, an ancient sport loaded with symbolism, danger, and maybe even a little blood. You find yourself standing on the edge of a large, sloped ball court, the ancient sound of bouncing rubber balls echoing of stone walls, carved with intricate patterns of gods and warriors.
This is the Aztec ball game, known as lamellically, a sport that was far more than mere entertainment. It was a ritual, a cosmic contest where the stakes were often life and death, and where every move carried spiritual meaning. Imagine the players, clad in protective gear made of wood and leather, using their hips, knees, and elbows to strike a heavy rubber ball through stone rings perched high above the court.
Their bodies slick with sweat, hearts pounding. They compete not just for victory, but to please the gods. The game symbolized the eternal struggle between day and night, life and death, order and chaos. Winning or losing could determine the fate of communities, and sometimes the players themselves.
The Aztec ball game has roots stretching back thousands of years throughout Mesoamerica, but by the time of the Aztecs, it had evolved into a complex ritual.
The courts were carefully constructed, often near temples, emphasizing the sacred nature of the game.
It was said that the ball represented the sun, and the game reenacted the battle between celestial forces. Some games even ended with human sacrifice, where the losing or winning team's captain might be offered to the gods to guarantee cosmic harmony.
Historians still argue whether sacrifices were a regular part of the game or reserved for special occasions.
Some accounts describe dramatic rituals where captives were sacrificed at the conclusion of a match, while others suggest that the players were revered athletes who might become priests or nobles. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a blend of sport, theatre, and spiritual practice. The crowd watching the game was no ordinary audience.
Nobles, priests, and commoners alike gathered to witness the spectacle, their cheers mingling with the rhythmic beating of drums and the sharp blasts of conch shells. The ball game was as much about social cohesion and political power as it was about athletic prowess. Victories were celebrated with feasts and ceremonies, reinforcing the authority of rulers and the favor of the gods.
And then there's the ball itself, made from solid rubber, weighing nearly 9 pounds. It was not something you'd want to get hit by. Imagine the skill and strength required to keep that heavy ball moving with only hips and elbows.
Players trained extensively, and injuries were common.
The physical danger added to the game's drama, making it both a spectacle and a testament to human endurance. Remember that time you tripped over your own feet playing a casual game of catch?
Now imagine doing all that with a 9-pound ball, in armor, while the fate of the world metaphorically hangs in the balance.
No pressure, right?
The ball game's lasting legacy is still felt today. Variations of this ancient sport survive in parts of Mexico and Central America, a living link to a ritual that once held the fate of the cosmos in its bounce and rebound.
As the final whistle blows and the players leave the court, you're left with a sense of how sport, spirituality, and politics fused into a single, breathtaking spectacle. Next up, the floating gardens, the ingenious agricultural marvel that fed an empire sustained by ritual and innovation alike.
You find yourself drifting across the shimmering waters surrounding Tenochtitlan, the great island city nestled in the middle of Lake Texcoco. Floating beneath your feet are the chinampas, those astonishing floating gardens that defy the harshness of the surrounding lake environment.
These man-made islands, carefully constructed by layering mud, reeds, and vegetation, created fertile patches of land where the Aztecs grew an astonishing variety of crops. Imagine stepping onto one of these narrow, lush green platforms, teeming with maize stalks, beans, squash, and flowers. The air is fragrant with blossoms and moist earth, a stark contrast to the often harsh and arid highlands surrounding the city.
The chinampas weren't just gardens.
They were the lifeblood of the empire, supporting a population that may have reached hundreds of thousands. The Aztecs ingeniously harnessed the lake's nutrient-rich waters, using a system of canals to irrigate and fertilize their crops naturally. Historians still argue about the exact origins and extent of Chinampa agriculture, but there's no doubt it was a cornerstone of Aztec society. Some believe this technique was borrowed and adapted from earlier cultures, while others suggest the Aztecs refined it into a highly productive system that enabled their capital city to thrive in a challenging environment. Whatever the case, the result was a sustainable, incredibly efficient method of farming that amazed early Spanish conquistadors who described it with awe.
The chinampas are also deeply connected to Aztec cosmology.
The floating gardens symbolized the Earth's resilience and the harmony between humans and nature.
Their design reflected a balance between human intervention and natural processes, illustrating the Aztecs' understanding that survival depended on respecting and working with the environment.
This relationship between spirituality and practicality runs like a thread through their entire culture. The success of chinampas was so profound that they could yield multiple harvests per year, something rare in ancient agriculture.
This agricultural abundance supported not only the city's massive population, but also the elaborate festivals, rituals, and sacrifices we've been exploring.
The food on these gardens' plates wasn't just sustenance. It was part of a larger spiritual economy, feeding the bodies and souls of the empire. And here's a quirky tidbit. The Aztecs sometimes planted companion crops like marigolds on the edges of chinampas. These flowers weren't just decorative, they repelled pests, a natural form of pest control long before modern pesticides.
Picture the daily life of a farmer on the chinampas, paddling a small canoe between plots, carefully tending crops, and harvesting fresh produce to bring to market.
Their work was both practical and sacred, feeding the empire and honoring the gods who made such bounty possible. So as you float gently over these miraculous gardens, take a moment to appreciate how innovation, faith, and sheer human determination combine to create a thriving civilization amid a watery world.
Next, prepare your palate for the exotic and sometimes shocking delights of Aztec cuisine, a feast of flavors and strange treats that might just surprise you. You find yourself seated at a bustling Aztec marketplace, surrounded by colorful stalls, and the rich aroma of spices, roasted meats, and freshly ground maize.
The variety of foods here is astonishing, and the choices might surprise your modern palate.
Aztec cuisine is a feast of flavors, textures, and sometimes downright bizarre ingredients.
Tonight, you'll taste through the delights and oddities that made up their diet, a blend of the practical, the sacred, and the exotic. First, imagine the staple, maize.
It's everywhere in tortillas, tamales, and it holds a warm, thick corn-based drink.
Maize wasn't just food. It was sacred, linked to the gods and the cycles of life and death. The Aztecs believed humans were made from maize, so eating it was a way of connecting with their ancestors and the divine. Now, prepare yourself for some unique protein sources. The Aztecs feasted on turkey and dog. Yes, dog, which was domesticated for food. But the real surprise, insects.
Chapulines, or grasshoppers, were a common snack, roasted and seasoned with chili and lime. They were crunchy, flavorful, and packed with protein, a practical choice for a diet reliant on sustainable resources. You might even spot roasted ants or beetles in the market, delicacies to some and a challenge to others. Chocolate, or zocotl, was another prized Aztec delight. But don't imagine sweet candy bars.
Their chocolate was a bitter, spicy drink, often mixed with chili and cornmeal. It was reserved mainly for the elite and priests, consumed during rituals and celebrations. Historians still debate whether this beverage was a health tonic, a stimulant, or a purely ceremonial drink. And then there's the flower of all oddities, the axolotl, an edible water insect considered a delicacy. Harvested from lakes and canals, these insects were dried, toasted, and used to flavor dishes or eaten on their own.
For us, it might seem strange, but for the Aztecs, these were both a vital protein source and a tasty treat.
The cuisine also reflects the Aztecs' connection to the environment. They cultivated amaranth and chia, nutrient-rich seeds that supported their diet. Beans and squash accompanied maize in the classic Three Sisters planting method, maximizing nutritional value and soil health.
You will also find ritual foods items prepared for offerings and ceremonies.
Certain dishes were reserved for religious events, often involving rare or symbolic ingredients.
Eating was a communal, sacred act, reinforcing social bonds and cosmic order.
Historians still argue about how much daily Aztec diet varied between commoners and nobles. While the elite enjoyed luxurious feasts with exotic ingredients and rich beverages, commoners' meals were simpler, but carefully balanced to meet their nutritional needs.
So, as you chew on a crunchy chapulin or sip the bitter chocolate, think about how every bite connects you to a culture that valued food not just for sustenance, but as a bridge to the divine. Coming up next, we'll delve into the sacred use of hallucinogens in Aztec rituals, plants that open doors to visions and the spirit world.
You're seated in a dimly lit temple chamber, the flickering shadows cast by burning copal incense dancing on stone walls etched with sacred glyphs. Around you, priests prepare for a ritual that will open the doors between the mortal world and the spirit realm a ceremony fueled by the power of hallucinogenic plants.
In the Aztec world, these sacred plants weren't recreational drugs.
They were vital tools for divine communication and spiritual insight.
Imagine inhaling the pungent smoke of Teonanacatl, or flesh of the gods, a sacred mushroom known today as psilocybin mushrooms. Its effects are intense, bringing visions, altered perceptions, and a sense of communion with the gods. Participants in these ceremonies believe the mushrooms allow their souls to journey beyond the physical, receiving messages, guidance, and blessings directly from the divine. But Teonanacatl was just one part of the story. The Aztecs also used olacuki, a morning glory seed containing powerful hallucinogenic compounds, crushed into a paste or ground into powder. These seeds were consumed during rituals to induce trance states.
The visions could be frightening or enlightening, revealing hidden truths about the cosmos or the fate of the empire. Historians still argue about the exact role these plants played. Were they mainly for priests to enter sacred states and interpret omens, or were they more broadly used among warriors and elites to prepare for battle or political decisions? Some suggest they were also used therapeutically to heal the sick or purge negative spirits. The rituals surrounding hallucinogen use were elaborate. Priests would often conduct ceremonies at night, accompanied by chanting, music, and dancing, to create an atmosphere conducive to visions. The experience was intense and sometimes terrifying, but also a source of profound spiritual power.
For the Aztecs, these altered states weren't escapism, but a path to understanding the divine order.
And here's a quirky tidbit. Aztec art sometimes depicts these mushrooms in stylized forms, indicating their sacred status.
Some of these images even resemble modern psychedelic art, centuries ahead of their time.
Of course, these experiences came with risks.
Misuse could lead to madness or social ostracism.
Only trained priests and selected individuals were allowed to partake in the most potent rituals, maintaining control over these powerful substances. As the visions fade and the ritual ends, you're left with a sense of awe for a culture that embraced altered consciousness as a bridge to the gods, a reminder that spirituality takes many forms, some of which challenge our very perception of reality. Next, we'll unravel the complex Aztec calendar system that governed these rituals and daily life with astonishing precision. We were standing beneath the towering sun, surrounded by carved stone monuments etched with complex symbols and numbers. These are no ordinary decorations, they're the Aztec calendars, intricate tools that governed everything from farming to festival days, from wars to sacred rituals.
Time, to the Aztecs, wasn't just ticking away, it was a living, breathing force that needed careful observation and interpretation to maintain cosmic balance.
The Aztecs used two main calendars simultaneously: the Xupahuali, a 365-day solar calendar, and the Tonalpohualli, a 260-day ritual calendar.
The first tracked the solar year, divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 extra unlucky days at the end. The second was a sacred calendar used to schedule religious ceremonies, divinations, and personal destiny readings. Imagine trying to keep track of 2 calendars at once, like running 2 apps simultaneously, each with its own alarms and reminders. The overlap of these calendars created a 52-year calendar round, a cycle that was hugely important for the Aztecs' understanding of time and fate.
Every 52 years, a special ceremony called the New Fire Ceremony was held to prevent the world from ending and ensure the sun would continue to rise. The priests, masters of astronomy and numerology, would interpret the calendars to predict auspicious days for everything from planting maize to declaring war. Your life might even be influenced by your birth date in the Tonalpohualli, which assigned you a specific combination of day signs and numbers, believed to shape your personality and fate. Historians still argue about how the Aztecs developed such a sophisticated timekeeping system. Some suggest they inherited it from earlier Mesoamerican cultures like the Maya and Teotihuacan, while others propose they made independent innovations. Either way, their calendars reflect an advanced understanding of astronomy and mathematics.
One quirky fact:
The Aztec calendar stone, often mistaken as a calendar, is actually a cosmological monument depicting the 5 suns or eras of the world. Its intricate carvings combine myth, history, and celestial observations in a dazzling piece of art that still mesmerizes visitors today.
Managing time was critical for ritual precision. Missing a festival or performing a sacrifice on the wrong day could bring disaster.
This obsession with cycles of time shows how the Aztecs viewed existence not as linear, but as repeating loops requiring constant renewal. So as you imagine the priests calculating days and watching the stars, remember the immense human effort behind maintaining cosmic order. It wasn't just superstition, it was survival.
Up next, meet Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of wind, wisdom, and transformation, and a figure wrapped in myth and mystery. You find yourself standing before a grand temple adorned with shimmering feathers and serpentine carvings, the home of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, one of the most enigmatic and revered gods of the Aztec pantheon.
This deity represents wind, wisdom, learning, and transformation, a god whose influence stretches from the heavens to the earth, weaving together nature, culture, and spirituality in an intricate dance. Imagine the priests preparing elaborate ceremonies to honor Quetzalcoatl, dressing in vibrant costumes adorned with quetzal feathers, known for their iridescent green-blue sheen prized above all else. The feathers symbolize the god's divine connection to both the sky and earth, merging the serpent's grounded power with the bird's soaring freedom. The rituals often included music, poetry, and offerings of precious goods, reflecting Quetzalcoatl's role as patron of knowledge and creativity.
Stories about Quetzalcoatl are rich and varied.
Some depict him as a culture hero who taught humans agriculture, writing, and the calendar. Others warn of his departure from the world, promising to return, a myth that later would be co-opted and reinterpreted during the Spanish conquest. His figure blurs the lines between God and man, embodying transformation itself. Historians still argue whether Quetzalcoatl's myths were primarily religious or also political tools used by rulers to legitimize their power. Some suggest that claiming descent from Quetzalcoatl helped emperors solidify their divine right to rule, weaving myth and governance into one. One quirky tidbit: the god is sometimes depicted wearing a mask of a skull or with wind-blown hair, emphasizing his dual nature of life and death, creation and destruction.
This duality permeates much of Aztec cosmology.
In rituals, priests would imitate the god's powers by orchestrating dances and processions, symbolically recreating the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth that Quetzalcoatl governed. These ceremonies were both deeply spiritual and theatrical, involving the entire community. The feathered serpent's influence wasn't limited to the Aztecs. Variants of this deity appear throughout Mesoamerica, from the Toltecs to the Maya, each culture adapting his story to fit their own worldview.
This widespread reverence hints at shared beliefs and cultural exchanges across the region.
As you absorb the complex symbolism of Quetzalcoatl, you realize this god embodies the very essence of Aztec life, constantly evolving, balancing forces, and bridging the mortal with the divine. Next, we'll explore Aztec views on death and the afterlife, where the journey beyond life is as mysterious as their rituals here on Earth. You stand at the edge of the great city cemeteries, where the Aztec view of death unfolds in layers of mystery and complexity, unlike anything you've known.
For the Aztecs, death was not the end, but a transition, a journey filled with challenges, guarded by gods, and determined by the manner of one's passing rather than simply the life one led.
The afterlife was a vivid, perilous landscape where souls travel to different realms, each with its own rules and destinies.
Imagine a soul setting out on its journey, navigating through 9 layers of the underworld, Mictlan, ruled by the god Mictlantecuhtli.
The dead had to overcome obstacles, rivers of blood, mountains that bled, and fierce creatures guarding the way. Only those who passed all trials would reach rest, but the path was different depending on how one died.
Warriors who fell in battle or sacrificial victims were honored with a quicker passage to the sun's realm, accompanying the sun in its daily journey across the sky. This complex system reflects the Aztecs' deep belief that death mirrored life's values and cosmic order. Dying for the empire or as a sacrifice granted a glorious afterlife, while natural death led to a long, arduous journey.
Even those who died from drowning or childbirth had special places in the afterlife, highlighting the nuanced approach to fate and honor.
Historians still debate the exact details of Aztec afterlife beliefs, as much of the knowledge comes from Spanish chroniclers who may have misunderstood or misrepresented indigenous ideas.
However, archaeological findings and codices reveal a rich tapestry of funerary practices, grave goods, and symbolism underscoring the importance of death rituals. In practice, families buried the dead with offerings such as food, tools, and jewelry to aid the soul's journey. The living performed ceremonies to honor ancestors and ensure their continued favor. The Aztecs believed that spirits could influence the world of the living, making death a shared experience rather than a solitary event. Interestingly, some Aztec rituals involved the symbolic killing of enemies to ensure the survival of the community, blending warfare and death into religious practice. This interplay of life, death, and ritual created a powerful framework that guided personal and collective behavior.
As the sun sets over the city, you realize that the Aztec approach to death is a reflection of their intricate worldview, one that embraces cycles, balances opposites, and finds meaning even in the darkest moments. Coming up, we'll meet the fierce warriors and their captives, whose fates were inextricably tied to these rituals of life and death.
You walk into the echoing halls of an Aztec military compound, where the air vibrates with the sounds of training and the clatter of obsidian blades against wooden shields. Here, the Aztec warriors, the jaguars and eagles of their society, prepare not just for battle, but for a role deeply entwined with religious ritual and societal order.
In the Aztec world, warriors were more than soldiers. They were priests of war, guardians of the empire's divine will.
Picture a warrior adorned in jaguar pelts or eagle feathers, each detail symbolizing their rank and valor. Their training was brutal, shaping not only physical strength but spiritual discipline. The ultimate goal? To capture enemies alive for sacrifice, because, in this culture, a captive's life was more valuable as a sacred offering than as a dead body on the battlefield. The capture of prisoners was central to Aztec warfare.
Instead of killing enemies outright, warriors sought to seize them alive during battle or ceremonial combats.
These captives would later be used in sacrificial ceremonies, believed to nourish the gods and ensure the empire's prosperity. This practice created a terrifying cycle. Warriors fought not just for land or glory, but to provide the blood necessary to maintain cosmic balance. Historians still debate the prevalence of this capture, don't kill strategy.
Some argue that it was a practical approach, conserving manpower and maximizing ritual offerings, while others see it as part of a broader political strategy to intimidate foes and display dominance.
The fate of captives was grim but spiritually significant.
Once brought to the capital, they were housed in temples, sometimes treated with a bizarre mixture of reverence and cruelty before the final ritual. They might be given special clothes, fed lavishly, and even allowed a final feast before their sacrifice. This complex treatment underscored the belief that they were honored guests in the god's service.
The warriors themselves occupied a unique social class, respected and feared.
Their achievements in battle could elevate them to nobility, granting them privileges and power.
Their lives were a continuous cycle of training, warfare, and religious ceremony, a fusion of the earthly and the divine. As you witness a warrior's training, you feel the weight of their responsibility, not just to conquer, but to maintain the fragile balance of the cosmos through blood and valor. The battlefield was a stage where earthly conflict met spiritual necessity.
You find yourself standing in the armory of an Aztec warrior, surrounded by weapons that look both deadly and strangely beautiful, each craft not just for battle, but to embody spiritual power.
The Aztecs forged arms from obsidian, a volcanic glass sharper than most metals, creating blades that could slice through flesh and bone with terrifying efficiency. Their weapons were more than tools of war. They were extensions of the warrior's spirit and symbols of divine favor.
Imagine the sound of an obsidian macuhut or a wooden club embedded with razor-sharp obsidian blades whistling through the air.
This unique weapon combined the blunt force of a club with the slicing ability of a sword, making it lethal in close combat. Warriors took pride in their macuhites, often decorating them with intricate carvings and feathers that signified their rank and accomplishments.
Aztec armor was equally symbolic, made primarily from thick cotton pads soaked in salt water and sometimes reinforced with leather or wood. This armor was surprisingly effective.
It was lightweight, allowing agility, and could absorb blows from arrows and obsidian blades. The armor was often adorned with feathers and animal motifs, linking the wearer to powerful creatures like jaguars and eagles, enhancing their fearsome reputation on the battlefield. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of Aztec weapons and armor compared to European steel arms introduced during the conquest.
Some suggest obsidian weapons were superior in sharpness but fragile, while others emphasize the tactical advantages Aztec warriors held due to their speed, knowledge of terrain, and combat style.
The symbolism extended beyond practical use.
Weapons and armor were blessed in religious ceremonies, believed to carry the power of the gods. Before battle, warriors would don their regalia and weapons with prayers and offerings, transforming into instruments of divine will. The preparation for war was as much spiritual as it was physical. Among the arsenal were spears, bows with wooden arrows tipped with obsidian, and atlat spear throwers that increased range and power.
Each weapon had a role, and mastery was a lifelong pursuit. The art of war was both a science and a sacred duty. Even the warrior's shield, often round and painted with symbols, served not only for defense, but as a declaration of identity and faith. The designs on shields could tell stories of past battles, victories, and divine protection. As you hold an obsidian blade, you feel its sharp edge not just a weapon, but a connection to a culture where war, religion, and identity were inseparable. The Aztec warrior's gear is a testament to a civilization that viewed battle as both a physical fight and a sacred ritual. You enter a small, fragrant chamber tucked away in the heart of the city, an Aztec healer's sanctuary. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, burning copal, and dried flowers. Here, Aztec medicine blends natural science, ritual, and spirituality into a complex system designed to heal both body and soul.
It's a world where herbal remedies coexist with ceremonies invoking gods for recovery, a delicate balance between practical knowledge and sacred belief. Imagine a healer, known as a tisitor, carefully grinding herbs like copal, maguey, and peyote to create poultices, teas, and salves. They understood the medicinal properties of many native plants, the use of chili peppers to stimulate circulation, the application of aloe vera for burns, and the extraction of sap from the maguey plant for wounds. This botanical knowledge was passed down through generations, forming an extensive pharmacopoeia. Yet Aztec healing wasn't just about herbs.
Rituals played a crucial role.
Before treating a patient, the tisitor would perform prayers and offerings to gods like Tlaloc, the rain god, or Xipe, god of renewal, seeking divine assistance.
Illness was often seen as a spiritual imbalance, caused by supernatural forces or a disruption in cosmic harmony, making ritual healing essential. Historians still argue the extent to which Aztec medicine was empirical versus spiritual.
Some believe their practices were remarkably advanced for the time, combining observation and experimentation, while others emphasized the dominant role of religion and superstition.
One quirky tidbit: Aztec surgeons practiced skull surgery, or trepanation, removing pieces of the skull to relieve pressure or treat injuries.
Archaeological evidence shows that some patients survived these procedures, indicating impressive surgical skills.
The Aztecs also used animal parts, like jaguar fat or hummingbird blood, believed to carry healing or magical properties. These ingredients highlight the interconnectedness of nature, medicine, and magic in their worldview. Healing rituals could last days and often involved music, dance, and the use of hallucinogenic plants to diagnose and treat illnesses. The tisitor's role extended beyond medicine to include spiritual guidance and community leadership. As you witness the healing process, you appreciate how the Aztecs approached health holistically, recognizing the interplay between physical symptoms and spiritual well-being.
You are seated beneath the shade of a flowering tree in a bustling Aztec plaza, surrounded by the soft murmur of voices reciting poetry and singing songs that ripple through the air like a gentle breeze.
In the Aztec world, poetry and music weren't just entertainment, they were sacred arts, vital expressions of emotion, history, and divine connection. The poets, known as Tlamatinae, were revered as sages, weaving words that captured the soul of their people and the universe.
Imagine the intricate metaphors and vivid imagery in their poems, birds symbolizing the soul, flowers representing beauty and transience, and jaguars embodying strength and courage. Their songs range from joyous celebrations to solemn laments, each carefully crafted to honor gods, recount epic tales, or express personal longing.
Poetry was a way to communicate with the divine and preserve the memory of ancestors and heroes.
Music accompanied these verses, with instruments like drums, flutes, and rattles adding rhythm and emotion.
The sounds were believed to carry spiritual power, capable of influencing nature and fate. Ceremonial performances could last hours, blending storytelling, dance, and music into immersive experiences. Historians still argue about how much of this oral tradition was preserved and how it influenced later indigenous literature. While many works were lost during conquest, codices and early colonial accounts offer glimpses into the richness of Aztec literary culture. One quirky tidbit: the Aztecs had a tradition of flower wars, ritual battles fought partly to capture prisoners for sacrifice and partly as metaphors in poetry, symbolic struggles between forces of light and darkness that poets celebrated in their verses. The poetry often explored themes of impermanence, reminding listeners that life, beauty, and power are fleeting.
This contemplative aspect offered comfort and insight amid the empire's turbulent realities.
As you listen, you sense the power of words to bridge worlds linking past and present, human and divine. The Tlamatinae were not just artists, but keepers of cultural wisdom, their creations echoing in the hearts of the people. Next, we'll journey into the marketplaces, the bustling centers of trade, gossip, and daily life where the empire's pulse truly beats.
You step into the vibrant chaos of an Aztec marketplace, the air live with the mingled scents of roasted corn, fresh flowers, and the sharp tang of obsidian tools. Stalls overflow with colorful goods, feathers shimmering like jewels, pottery painted with intricate designs, and baskets piled high with exotic fruits.
The marketplace was far more than a place to buy and sell. It was the bustling heart of Aztec society, where social, political, and spiritual life intersected.
Imagine the cacophony of voices haggling over prices, traders calling out exotic wares from distant regions, and musicians weaving melodies through the crowd.
Here, merchants dealt in cacao beans, prized as currency and ingredient for the sacred chocolate drink.
You might glimpse traders from far-flung lands like the Gulf Coast or Oaxaca, bringing goods that connected the sprawling empire in a web of commerce and culture.
The marketplace was also a place for news and gossip, rumors about political intrigues, upcoming festivals, or military campaigns spread quickly. It was a hub where farmers, artisans, priests, and nobles mingled, blurring social boundaries for moments of exchange and connection. Historians still argue about the scale and organization of these markets. Some chroniclers describe them as massive, highly regulated events with thousands of participants, while others suggest a more informal network of local and regional markets functioning together. One quirky fact: the Aztecs used cacao beans as currency, but they also had a system of tally sticks and knotted cords called quippers to record transactions, an early form of bookkeeping that some scholars debate was inherited or developed independently.
Religious practices even intersected with commerce.
Markets often featured altars where offerings were made to gods like Yakutacutli, patron of merchants and travelers, ensuring safe and profitable journeys. You can imagine the lively scenes of daily life here. Farmers bringing fresh produce from the chinampas, artisans displaying their crafts, and children darting through the crowd chasing after stray dogs or colorful birds. The marketplace was a sensory feast, pulsing with the energy of an empire at its peak. As you wander through this vibrant space, you sense the intricate connections that kept the Aztec world thriving, from trade and politics to religion and community.
You find yourself in the courtyard of an Aztec home, where women bustle about, weaving intricate textiles, preparing food, and tending to children.
In Aztec society, women held vital roles that extended far beyond the domestic sphere. They were the backbone of family, economy, and even spirituality. Their contributions were woven into every aspect of daily life, shaping the empire's future from the hearth to the temple.
Imagine the rhythmic clacking of the backstrap loom as women skillfully create colorful garments adorned with symbolic patterns.
These textiles weren't mere clothing, they communicated social status, ethnic identity, and religious devotion.
Skilled weavers were highly respected, their art passed down through generations and connected to sacred traditions. Women also played essential roles in agriculture, particularly in managing Chinampas gardens and preparing crops. They processed maize into masa for tortillas and crafted traditional foods that nourished families and supported festivals. Their expertise ensured the survival and prosperity of their communities. Spiritually, women could serve as priestesses, midwives, and healers, mediating between the human and divine.
They participated in ceremonies and rituals, often performing dances and songs dedicated to goddesses like Kotlikyu and Chowchiathlet. Their presence was essential in maintaining cosmic balance and community harmony. Historians still debate the extent of women's power in political life. While formal political roles were dominated by men, some evidence suggests influential women held sway behind the scenes, advising leaders or managing estates. The line between public and private power was fluid, shaped by family ties and social networks.
One quirky tidbit: Aztec women were skilled entrepreneurs, often running market stalls and crafting goods for sale.
Their economic activities contributed significantly to the empire's vibrant marketplace culture.
As you observe a woman teaching her daughter weaving techniques, you see how knowledge and tradition flow through generations, securing identity and survival.
The complex, layered roles of women remind you that every empire is held together not just by warriors and priests, but by the steady hands and hearts of its women. Next, we'll dive into Aztec music and dance, a sensory world that enlivened rituals, celebrations, and everyday life.
You find yourself in the midst of an Aztec celebration, surrounded by the rhythmic pulse of drums, the piercing calls of flutes, and dancers moving with fierce grace and precision. Music and dance were not mere entertainment in Aztec society.
They were powerful expressions of religious devotion, social identity, and cosmic order. Every step, every beat carried meaning, weaving together community and spirituality in a dynamic, living ritual. Imagine the dancers, dressed in vibrant costumes adorned with feathers, beads, and painted faces, their movements telling stories of gods, heroes, and the cycles of nature. The choreography was meticulously planned, passed down through generations, and closely tied to festivals honoring specific deities. Music guided their motions, with instruments like the cucuit, a large drum, tepanastli, a slit drum, and ocarinas creating haunting melodies that filled temple plazas and marketplaces alike.
Music also marked transitions in daily life. Births, marriages, and funerals were accompanied by songs and dances, connecting individuals to the larger tapestry of community and cosmos. For warriors, music prepared them for battle and celebrated their victories. For priests, it facilitated communication with the divine.
Historians still argue about the precise meanings and functions of some dances and songs, as much was passed down orally and lost after the Spanish conquest. However, surviving codices and early accounts reveal a rich tradition where music and movement were inseparable from Aztec cosmology and identity. One quirky tidbit: some dances involved impersonations of animals and supernatural beings, blurring the boundaries between human and spirit. Dancers might mimic the jaguar's stealth or the eagle's soaring flight, embodying the traits needed to maintain cosmic balance. As the festival reaches its climax, you feel the electric energy of collective rhythm, a heartbeat syncing the past and present, the mortal and divine.
This sensory experience reminds you that for the Aztecs, art wasn't separate from life, it was life itself, a celebration of existence in all its complexity.
Next, we'll conclude our journey by reflecting on the lasting legacy of the Aztec Empire and its rituals as civilization whose echoes still resonate today.
You find yourself surrounded by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant murmur of voices carrying song and poetry through the Aztec marketplace.
Here, art and life blend seamlessly. The Clamatinime, or wise poets, weave intricate verses full of metaphor and meaning. Their words paint pictures of the fleeting beauty of life, the power of nature, and the delicate balance between the mortal and divine. Music and dance accompany these recitations, with drums, flutes, and rattles setting the rhythm for dancers whose movements tell stories older than the stones beneath your feet. Poetry and song were not mere pastimes, but sacred arts, vehicles for history, devotion, and philosophy.
These oral traditions preserved knowledge, conveyed moral lessons, and reinforced social ties.
Historians still debate how much was lost after the conquest, but what remains paints a vivid picture of a culture rich in symbolism and emotional depth.
The dances, often mimicking jaguars, eagles, and serpents, brought to life the very forces the Aztecs believed governed the cosmos, connecting the participants to their gods and ancestors.
From the plaza, your attention shifts to the bustling marketplace itself, the vibrant heart of daily Aztec life. Here, traders from distant regions barter for cacao beans, feathers, and exotic goods. The marketplace is a sensory whirlwind. Colorful textiles, the scent of roasting maize, the chatter of buyers and sellers, and the occasional notes of sacred music. Marketplaces were social hubs, blending economic activity with religious devotion. Even the gods had their patrons here, like Yakutacutli, the god of merchants, to whom offerings were made for prosperous trade. Historians still argue about the scale of these markets, but they were undoubtedly vital arteries of Aztec society.
Women move gracefully through this world, embodying strength and tradition. Their roles span from skilled weavers crafting elaborate textiles to healers, midwives, and ritual participants. Their weaving was an art form, with patterns signaling status and spiritual allegiance.
Economically, women ran market stalls, produced goods, and contributed decisively to the empire's prosperity. While formal political power belonged to men, women wielded influence within family, economy, and ritual life, a nuance still explored and debated by scholars today.
As the sun sets, music and dance fill the plazas again, celebrating the gods and the cycles of nature. These sensory rituals, drums beating, feathers swirling, voices rising, were more than entertainment. They were cosmic acts, renewing the world with each step and note.
Dancers embodied the spirits of animals and gods, their movements a sacred language, bridging human and divine. The performances celebrated life's dualities, creation and destruction, light and dark, order and chaos.
Finally, as night descends, you reflect on the legacy of the Aztec Empire, a civilization that thrived on paradox, blending beauty with brutality, innovation with tradition.
Their rituals and arts, their fierce devotion to gods and community, left an imprint that echoes through time. Though much was lost, the spirit of their culture endures in the stories, art, and memory of those who came after. So as you close your eyes, let the vibrant colors, rhythmic beats, and whispered poems of the Aztecs fade softly into a gentle night. Carry their story lightly, as a reminder of the rich tapestry of human experience. Sleep well, cradled in the soft embrace of history's light. Good night, sweet dreams, and let the sound of the rain soothe your soul.